ring the bell. And my name is Kent Hutchison, and I'm with the president of the Lone Star Rotary E Club. I'm good, Patrick. I'll let you top yourself off, and then I'll introduce you. But I'm going to go around and introduce everybody. I'm excited about y'all being here. I'm excited about our program, and I'll introduce our program speaker here in a few minutes. I'll turn it over to Bobby and Karen and have them introduce themselves and to the whole group.
Karen, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Karen Chapman, coming to you from the lovely Cypress, Texas. And I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic.
And I'm Bobby Chapman. I'm also coming to you from Cypress, Texas, just in a different room of the house.
Are you upstairs or downstairs? Which one are you?
I'm downstairs. Karen is upstairs. You see that beautiful view behind her?
Yeah, see the penthouse. We live in downtown Cypress.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful skyline of downtown Cypress, and we live in the penthouse apartment on the top.
Don't try to find a parking place at their house.
No.
We're happy to be here at this week's meeting.
Tom and Linda, I've got y'all muted, but you can unmute yourself. You want to say hello and tell us where y'all coming in from?
We're happy to be here. Glad to see you guys. Sounds like a wonderful program. We are all blessed.
Yep. From Magnolia, Texas.
From Magnolia, Texas. The wind's blowing a lot here, and our little fellow is out trying to power wash our driveway. So that could be a problem, but other than that, God is good.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Sharda, you want to introduce yourself to everybody? We were talking to you about Lufkin, Texas.
Sharda, no, Lufkin, Texas.
Fantastic.
What else can I say?
Berta, can you hear me?
What? Oh, me?
Yeah, you want to introduce
yourself? Gaskin. Yep, I can. Yeah, I'm in Sugar Land.
Fantastic. Okay. Heidi
Marcella. I am in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Fantastic. Jason.
Hello, y'all. I'm Jason Kutnak. I'm from League City, and glad to be here. Obviously, I've been a long day, but glad to be here.
And Jason's our president-elect, and so we're so excited about Jason. And just a few more weeks, and Jason will get through all this, and so we're excited about Jason.
Yes, and I will see you guys this weekend. So
that's right. Exactly. And then I'll introduce Ronnie and Jenny Hutchison. They're down there. They're kind of under the weather, so they turned off their camera, but they're logged in. That's my parents. Dad's was past president of the Bridge City Orangeville Club and a past assistant governor. And my lovely mother. They've been very supportive of logging in every week to support me as president. So I appreciate that. Dr. McKenzie, can you hear us? Oh, I'm sorry, Alana. We have another member. Lana.
Yes, I'm actually here.
Fantastic.
I was dealing with a Rotary question today, and so I was like, you know what? I'll still be at work, but I could maybe make a meeting. So I'm actually literally still working, but here. So I am a member, although you never see me. I'm in Liberty.
Question, Alana.
What was the question? Yeah. I came across an acronym in some of the Rotary documents and collection that we have here. We have the Rotary District 5910 archives, and of course a building out here. The AGYO, Texas 1965. I can't figure out what AGYO stood for.
AGYO.
From the 60s. So if anybody thinks of the answer, let me know.
Maybe assistant governor, youth officer, or something like that.
Maybe so.
We were joined in 1990, so I don't know what that is.
All right.
Yeah, I wasn't around then either, so I don't know.
Who's next? Let me pull up somebody here. See, Mark, you want to introduce yourself again? I know you did a few minutes ago.
Sure. I'm Mark Van Velzer, and I'm with the Bryan Rotary Club. I'm here at Bryan College Station. Got the invite, so I thought, visit with you guys and see what it's like. I'll say this much. You guys are a lot more laid back than the meetings there in Bryan. They are a little bit more stiff-collared than you
Oh,
guys
goodness.
are.
Mark,
You guys are extremely laid back.
Mark, I sat next to you at a Bryan meeting about a month ago.
That's the nice lady that I met from this.
Yeah,
from the
well, I didn't
organization.
know you were looking for action, or I would have passed you my, what are those things called that you put liquor in?
A flask.
Oh, I don't.
I would have passed you my flask.
No, I
didn't
don't.
know you were looking for action. I'm glad you're here.
No, I don't drink, and it's
No,
not that
I'm
I
kidding.
have
I'm
any
kidding,
opposition.
Mark.
No, I'm a diabetic, and so I don't drink.
Well,
So
I'm
I
just
leave that.
kidding.
I leave that to the rest of you, though.
Yeah.
That's perfectly okay.
Fantastic. Well, who else did I forget here? I'm sorry. I'm trying to multitask here. Tita's trying to log on. She's going to call in, so I'm trying to text her the phone numbers and the code number and all that good stuff. Who else have I missed? Have I missed any?
Charlotte?
He didn't have a chance to say anything.
Oh, I'm sorry, Charlotte. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said Dr. McKenzie didn't have a chance to say anything.
Yes.
So
What exactly were you expecting me to say?
well, your best Barbara Jordan voice is coming across a little, but
Well, I was answering her question regarding those acronyms that we don't know anything about because we were not chartered in 1960. And no Lufkin person is on the line.
you sound like you're down in Pearlhead Caverns.
That's right. That's right. Sounds like the voice of God. It really did. It sounded
I
like
was gonna say, Dr. McKenzie coming in loud and clear from heaven.
That's right. That's right, Dr. McKenzie. It comes in really strong. I love it.
That's 46 years of practicing with students.
46 years.
Fantastic, fantastic. And then Darby's running errands. She's in the East Montgomery Club. Darby, are you still running errands on your phone or?
I am on my phone, but I am still present and listening. But yes, I am Darby Lindsay from the East Montgomery County Club, and somehow I feel like I'm going to end up being the lifelong president, but that's okay.
Fantastic. Well, I want to introduce. I'm gonna ask everybody to mute themselves real quick, and then I'm gonna set for Craig, and then I'm gonna turn the program over to Craig Quarter. Craig Quarter is our program tonight, and Craig is the Chief Juvenile Probation Officer here in Orange County, Texas. He's a graduate of Orangeville High School, a graduate of Stephen F. Austin State University. Played football for Lamar University before they lost their football program in the 80s. Before they brought it back. But he has been a probation officer, a parole officer, and now he's back in Orange County as our chief. And I asked him to talk to us a few weeks back or a month or two ago. We talked about the foster program in Texas, and it got me thinking. And I said, Craig and I have coffee a couple times a month, and he's talking about I don't want to say a crisis. I don't want to get into this program, but the challenge that we have with our youth in all of our counties. And I asked him if he would just share some thoughts and his thoughts of being a juvenile probation officer, talking about the youth of Texas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Craig.
Thank you, Kent, and thank you to everybody for having me. I really appreciate it. I could talk about this for quite some time. I started my career after I graduated from SFA as an adult parole officer. And I lasted 3 years. I just didn't like it. And a job opened up as a juvenile probation officer here in Orange County, and I applied for that job, and I fell in love with it. I found out that this is where my passion lied. And the funny part is, all through college, I said, I'm never going to work with kids. I'm never going to work with kids. I don't want to work with kids. After 3 years of dealing with adult offenders, I decided I would give kids a chance. And I really haven't looked back. I've had several different opportunities in the field. I served 8 years as a juvenile probation officer here in Orange County. Left here in 2005 and went to the state, moved to Austin, worked for what was then the Texas Juvenile Probation Commission. It was an awesome opportunity because I was hired on as a training specialist, and I was able to travel all over the state training brand new probation officers at their training academies, but also training experienced officers and even in some cases training judges and administrators. And so it was a really neat experience for me. I left there in 2012 and went and worked at that other university, Sam Houston State. And I spent 3 years as a project coordinator for the Correctional Management Institute of Texas. And it was very rewarding work, but my heart was still calling for juvenile probation. And it just so happened that the chief juvenile probation officer position opened up back in 2015 here in Orange County, where I started my career as a juvenile probation officer. I applied for the job and was hired, and feel very blessed to have this job. It'll be 10 years this month. April 27th of this month will be 10 years that I've been the chief of this department. And it's challenging work, but it's rewarding work. And I was telling somebody the other day, I try to make I try to make this a comfortable place to work, because the work we do is very uncomfortable. And we have had, quite a few challenges recently. And I never know what information you guys want to hear. I was going to give just a brief overview of the juvenile justice system in Texas. I'm not sure what your familiarity levels are on that, but just real briefly to kind of tell you how the juvenile justice system in Texas works. There's a state component and there's a county component. And our current state component is the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. They provide oversight and a conduit of funding, state funding, to local county juvenile probation departments. So that's kind of one half of what they do. But the other half is they also run the statewide correctional facility. So when a court orders a juvenile into TJJD, into a state correctional facility. Some of you may be more familiar with the term TYC, Texas Youth Commission. In 2011, our legislature basically abolished the Texas Juvenile Probation Commission and the Texas Youth Commission, combined those two into one agency and created TJJD. And that one agency does all the same things that those two agencies did. And so you have the state level, which provides monitoring, inspections for our probation department, our fiscal monitoring. Those departments that have facilities, they do monitoring and inspections of those facilities. But then they also run the state facilities for kids that are committed to the state. In the local juvenile probation departments, of course, we're talking about the state of Texas. And so forgive me, somebody who introduced themselves, they were from Dallas-Fort Worth area. Obviously, my little department here in Orange, Texas, and the department in Dallas are apples and oranges. I have a total of 4 probation officers, me and an administrative assistant that I could not live without. And so we're a very small but dedicated group of people. You get into larger cities, you're talking hundreds of employees, facilities, things like that. And so it's a whole different ball game. But one of the things that I noticed in my career as a trainer traveling across the state, having worked in a smaller department, but then walking into a larger department and training staff there and listening to their woes, and I realized that really we're all dealing with the same issues. It's just all about scale. And so we have the same problems, the same issues. It's just there's more of it if you're in Houston or Dallas or something like that. But we certainly have our share of issues here. Our funding is in my county, in Orange County, is about 50-50. So about 50% of my funding, 50 to 55% of my funding comes from state grants. It comes from state aid that we receive through a contract with the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. And then I also have a local budget, which is a county budget that's approved by my juvenile board. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later, and our commissioner's court. The really fun part about that is your state budget fiscal year starts in September and your county budget starts in October, but it's all running at the same time. And that makes for a fun beginning and end of the fiscal year when you have two different running fiscal years. But we make it work, and we're blessed to receive the funding that we receive, and that helps us provide services for the kids. In Texas, juvenile probation departments, you may or may not be aware, are predominantly county employees. They work for the county, but each county has a juvenile board. For instance, my board is basically, I work for all the judges in Orange County. So all 3 district judges, our 2 county court at law judges, and then our county judge sit on the juvenile board. They hire the chief. They set our department policies and procedures. They set our budget annually. They set our salaries annually. But we do receive money from the county. So I also have some accountability to our commissioner's court. So I have accountability to commissioner's court. I have accountability to the juvenile board, which is all the judges. And I have accountability to the state because we receive state funds. And that's no problem. I mean, we can account for every dime we spend. And I try to make sure I budget most of it to go to work programs and services for the kids. So who do we, if at any time somebody has a burning question about juvenile justice and you want to break in, feel free, okay? But moving forward, who do we work with? We work with kids who are between the ages of 10 and have not quite reached their 17th birthday. So if they commit an offense after they turn 10 and before they turn 17, that case is going to be referred to juvenile probation. They are considered a juvenile under Texas state law. Once they turn 17 and if they commit a crime after their 17th birthday, then they are basically handled in the adult criminal justice system. But from the time they turn 10 until they turn 16, almost 17, those cases are referred to us. They're referred to us. Most of them are delinquent conduct, which is basically crime. But some of it is also CHIN's offenses like runaways and things like that, child in need of supervision. So it runs the gamut. I mean, we have referrals of juveniles who've run away from home that we work with and try to provide programs and services for, all the way up to, unfortunately, kids who commit crimes like murder and aggravated robbery and aggravated sexual assault and all those types of things. And so we deal with all of that in the juvenile justice system, and it can be quite complex because there's a big difference between a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old. And so we have to find ways to manage that. I've already talked about oversight. TJJD, again, provides the state correctional side of it. Just to give you some perspective, in Texas right now, about on any given day, 97 to 98% of the youth who are referred to the juvenile justice system in Texas are handled at the county level. Your county juvenile probation departments are working with those kids. They're providing supervision of those kids. They're trying to provide programs for those kids. In some instances, they may be placing those kids in residential facilities, but the county manages 97 to 98% of the kids annually that are referred to the juvenile justice system, meaning that the state correctional side of it, about 2 to 3% of the kids who ultimately are referred to the juvenile justice system end up in the state correctional side. And I don't say that to discount what TJJD does on the state correctional level. I want to make it clear that the kids that ultimately end up in TJJD, in that state correctional system, are usually violent offenders with very serious felony offenses. And many times they are repeat offenders. Many times they're kids that juvenile probation departments have tried many times unsuccessfully to work with in the community. Maybe we've even placed them into residential facilities. Most of the time in my county, before we recommend a commitment to TJJD, we've tried everything that I have available in the community. We've even placed them once, twice. We've even had some kids that we've placed in 3 different residential facilities before we go to court and say, you know, we've done all we can do. And the good part about that is it's a very small percentage of kids that go there. Right now, any given time, there's between 600 and 700 kids in Texas in our TJJD facilities. I can remember a time when I first started in juvenile probation in 1997, back when you could send, when courts could send misdemeanor offenders to TYC. There could be 3,000 to 4,000 kids in state-run correctional facilities. So as a state, we've made tremendous progress in trying to get those numbers down, because we know the research shows us that they're going to be more successful if we can keep them closer to their home and closer to the community. But the flip side of that is we do have some kids that are just dangerous, and we have to have a place for them to go. And I have no intentions of getting political, but every session there's a push. We just need to close those facilities down. And I'm here to tell you, as someone who spent 25 years working in this business, unfortunately, even though we've done a great job of getting those numbers way down, and some of it is through legislation, but I believe a lot of it is through the hard work of county-run juvenile probation departments. There are certain cases where we've exhausted our resources and it's too dangerous to leave them in the community. And so it's unfortunate that we have to have those places, but we do. So that's my piece on that. And it's unfortunate, but I'm proud as a field how we've managed to get that number down. Can we ever get it to 0? I don't think so. Unfortunately, we have kids committing very serious crimes, and we have to take, as much as we want to help and rehabilitate these kids, and they still get that rehabilitation at the state level, we also have to take the safety of our communities into consideration. And that's the balancing act for me as a chief of a juvenile probation department is, you know, we have to keep that in mind. We're always having to balance. Yes, we want to help this kid. Yes, we want to rehabilitate them. But at the same time, we have to keep our community safe, because that's our job. That's why we're here. That's the goal. And so that's kind of the system. And I wanted to point that out because, you know, in your respective communities, your county probation departments, just remember that those guys are working with 97 to 98% of the kids, and they're doing their best to keep them out of these correctional facilities.
Hey, Craig, I'm going to ask a question because I know the answer, but so unfortunately, sometimes y'all have a child that y'all got to commit, that you've got to, that you've like, we got to pull them away from the parents, or we've got to detain them, and you have to find a bed for them somewhere. That ties up an officer, and when they have to transport them 4 and 5 hours away, and then there's some time limits there, which we should have, that where you have to bring them back before a judge, and we obviously use some courts and so forth. Can you go into that a little bit as well? Because that's
that was one of my I've got me a little outline here.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that.
No, that's all right. That's good. I'll jump right to it. It's so, again, some perspective. Okay, they're in Texas. There's 164 juvenile probation departments serving 254 counties. So every county is represented by a juvenile probation department. Some of them represent judicial districts. So for instance, what we refer to as Jasper County Juvenile Probation, they actually cover Jasper, Newton, San Augustine, and Sabine counties. Okay, so you have some departments that cover multiple counties. So there's 164 juvenile probation departments. There's 254 counties. All counties are represented by a juvenile probation department. There's only 45 registered pre-adjudication detention facilities in Texas. And 42 of those are county-run facilities, 3 are privately run facilities. So what does that tell you? In most counties, most juvenile probation departments don't have a juvenile detention facility. Orange County, where I work, where I'm the chief, we do not have our own juvenile detention facility. And so we have to contract with other counties, and I also contract with some of those private facilities. I have right now about 12 contracts, and we're very blessed that most of the time I'm able to get my kids relatively close. Jefferson County, I don't know if there's anybody on from Jefferson County, bless them, they work really close with us and they help us as best that they can. And so we try our best to get the kids as close to home as possible when they have to be detained. In other words, they've been arrested for an offense, and we've found that either they're not getting suitable supervision at home, or they're a danger to themselves or others, or there's a statutory reason, such as they used or possessed a firearm during the commission of the offense. Then the only person that can release that juvenile is a judge. And so that means when I get the call at 3 a.m., we have this juvenile in custody for armed robbery. He had a 9mm. I've got to find a detention bed. I don't have the authority to say release him to his parents. If it's something that doesn't involve a firearm and I think it's safe to release it to the parents, I can make that call. If it involves a firearm, only a judge can make that call. And so I have 12 contracts. So of those 45 facilities, I have contracts with 12 of them. The furthest one out is Nueces County, Corpus Christi, which for an old man like me who has to make a lot of pit stops is about a 6-hour drive one way. So you're looking at 12-hour round trip ride just to bring that juvenile to a detention facility, if we can't get them in closer. Now, I will say our Southeast Texas region works really close together, and they try really hard to help us out. So I have contracts with Jefferson County, Hardin County, Montgomery County, Fort Bend County has always been a big help for us when we get in a pinch. But there have been occasions where Victoria County is the closest place, or Nueces County is the closest place. And so you're right. We have to make those trips, and there's I don't want to say there's a shortage of beds per se, but kind of the challenges that go along with that is there's currently a backlog of committed youth. TJJD, it really actually started right before COVID, but during COVID and then right after COVID, they went through a very serious staffing crisis. And they were having a huge amount of turnover and having a very difficult time staffing their facilities. And so it created a wait list. Prior to 2021, if we committed a youth to TJJD, within a week, we were making arrangements for transport, and we were taking them to Brownwood to their intake facility and dropping them off. So we were getting them out of the local detention, the pre-adjudication detention facilities, and we were bringing them to the TJJD facility. Well, now on any given day, there's a waiting list of kids between 120 and 130 kids who are sitting in the county-run juvenile detention facilities using the beds because there's a wait list, because TJJD is they're doing everything they can to mitigate it. They've given pay raises and they're bringing their staffing levels up. but they're still not fully staffed. And so they're trying their best to keep safety in mind. So basically where we are now at the state level to keep things safe in those facilities is when one kid discharges, one kid comes in. So if 13 kids discharge from the state facilities this week, they'll bring 13 kids from that waiting list. Well, what that does is on average, because the juvenile doesn't get put on the waiting list until after they're adjudicated and a judge orders them into TJJD. So we're looking at about a 75 to 80-day wait after they're adjudicated. That doesn't even count all the time they may have spent in detention waiting to go to court. That's the time. And so that creates a space problem. And then, you know, some of the local probation departments have had similar staffing issues because you have to have, I don't run a facility, so I don't know all the ins and outs and all that. I don't have to know all that, but I do know that there's standards for certain ratios. You've got to have so many staff for so many kids and things like that. And so when we call asking for a bed, it's not, is there an empty bed over there? It's, do we have enough staff to take one more kid in right now? And so that's something that that we have to take into consideration. So you're right, Kent. It does create some issues as far as transporting kids and getting kids into facilities. But we make it work, and the field works together, and we try to help each other out as much as we can. And I can't thank the departments that I have contract. I can't thank them enough because, I always manage to find a bed. We may be on the road a while, but I manage to find a bed if I need one. And so that's an important issue. But TJJD is working toward trying to eliminate that backlog, but at the same time, you want to make sure you're providing a safe environment for those kids. And so that's one of the real challenges that we're dealing with right now. One blessing the legislature gave us in the last session is they did allow us to carry over for detention hearings, just a detention hearing. We're allowed to have Zoom detention hearings. And so most of those counties that are hundreds of miles away from me, if we detain a child there, and pretty good understanding that there's a good opportunity, there's a good possibility they're going to be ordered back into detention for 10 working days or 15 working days before another hearing, then the counties that run the facilities will actually help us facilitate a Zoom hearing. So we don't have to drive 6 hours, pick them up, drive 6 hours back, have a hearing, drive 6 hours back over there, drop them back off when the judge orders them back into detention. So the Zoom hearings have been a blessing. And that was one thing that was started during COVID. I always tell people that for my field, that's the only good thing that came out of COVID was, the courts realized that there was some value in Zoom hearings and certain proceedings. And the legislature even went so far as to make that law where we could actually, have Zoom hearings. So that's been a big blessing for us and saves us some trips, but it's definitely a challenge. I keep hoping. Last session, TJJD, I think, received funding to build 2 new facilities. And so they're kind of zeroing in, I think, on sites to build those facilities. The goal being to build them in parts of the state where they're more likely to have a better hiring pool. Because the facilities that exist now are kind of in areas where you just don't have a lot of people interested in doing that line of work. And so they're trying to get in areas where they feel like they can have a better chance of hiring staff to work, because it is very necessary. It is very needed. And I firmly do believe that the current administration that TJJD has is doing everything they can to mitigate it, but it's just not something that you solve overnight. When you drop down to 40% you're 40% staffed at one point in 2021 or something like that. It's very difficult to run a correctional facility, especially when you're dealing with some of the toughest, like I said, assaultive, combative kids that need a lot of attention. That becomes a real issue.
Craig, I mean, so what I'm hearing you say is it's kind of what we saw back in the 90s when the legislature started building adult prisons. Historically, Texas had built these facilities in rural communities. And like I said, the staffing is limited in those rural communities. And we saw in the 90s where they started building more, I say, urban prisons for the adult population. And we're now seeing that with the juvenile, right? These detention centers.
I think that's the goal. I don't know if they've I don't know if they've zeroed in, but that was kind of the goal, because that was the question. Well, we build a new facility, you can't staff the ones you have. Well, part of the reason you can't staff the ones you have is because of where they're located.
They're in a rural area,
in a rural area. So it's hard enough just to staff it with juvenile correctional officers. Then you start getting into specialized positions, because you also have on top of correctional officers, you have to have teachers and administrators and licensed therapists and all of those things. So it's even more difficult to fill those specialized positions that require education, require college degrees and things like that. And so I'm hoping that move and putting them into areas where they have a little bit better field of people to draw employees. They've also given some pretty significant pay raises, which has helped. I mean, their recruiting is up and they're getting more people. But it's just a slow roll, and it trickles down. It trickles down, and because those beds that those kids are sitting in for 75, 80 days, 90 days in some cases, those are really pre-adjudication beds. They're not designed for kids who've, the way it's supposed to work is you go to pre-adjudication detention, you're either released home, on conditions of release, or you stay in detention until court. And then after court, you go somewhere else. You either go on probation, or you go to a placement facility, or you're committed to TJJD and, you go. But now they're just kind of sitting there in those beds. And so that's a real issue. I don't blame anybody. It's just one of those things. And I really believe they're doing everything they can to mitigate it. It's a slow roll, but it definitely, when you get that call in the middle of the night and okay, this isn't a case, I can say, well, can he go spend the night with Uncle Johnny until things calm down? Because there are those calls that we get, and that's great. If I don't have to detain a juvenile, that's my preference. In fact, the Texas Family Code, Title III of the Family Code, which is basically what we operate under, if you read it, it lends itself toward release. I mean, we look for every reason to release them, and there's specific things we have to find to not release them and authorize detention. And so if I can find an alternative to detention, certainly we're going to try to find that alternative. But there are certain cases where at that point, that given moment, they're a danger to themselves or others, or they're not getting suitable supervision at home and they need to be detained. And it's you kind of get that lump in your throat going, okay, I have to start calling all these facilities. I hope somebody has a bed,
Hey, Craig, I think Mark has a question. Mark, if you want to mute yourself, you have a question. Then I think Tom, did you have a question too? All right, after Mark, Tom, so let Mark, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, these days it's probably a lot more complicated with organizations such as Trendy Alagua, who recruit young children in MS-13. You didn't have this problem 10 years ago. I assume it wasn't what it is now, but that's got to make it a complication for you guys. And then the sanctuary cities, and I'm not being critical, I'm just saying these are problems they have as adults. It's got to make it infinitely more complicated for the juveniles. Has that hit the state of Texas badly? And because those are the ones, if they've done what everybody says they've done, those are truly people who have done some not so good things that are going to be not that you don't want them out in the community if they've really done these acts, not because of where they're from, but those things. So has that greatly complicated things for in the juvenile justice system?
I can't say that I've experienced a lot of it in this part of the state. I'm sure South Texas, El Paso area, I'm sure it probably has affected, I can't imagine how it wouldn't, because you're going to have juveniles, who are caught committing delinquent conduct. And they could end up in juvenile detention facilities. If they're arrested for delinquent conduct, then they could end up in juvenile detention facilities, and that would certainly, I don't, obviously we don't send kids to El Paso or anything like that, so I haven't personally dealt with that, but any gang affiliation will, creates problems, because what we found when we start having little kind of gang activities, and it's more kind of street gang thing, is we get these waves of, it's like all of a sudden things are kind of quiet, and then all of a sudden it's just bam, 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 and they're kids with fire. That's one of the things I have on my list, is kids and guns. That's a real problem. We have a lot of kids who are carrying guns around, and we're getting arrests for unlawful carrying of weapons. We're getting arrests for aggravated robberies involving firearms. We're getting arrests for, unfortunately, things like manslaughter and murder. I mean, we've had some pretty bad things happen in our community. And part of it is the access to guns. And of course, when it all plays out, it was a stolen firearm. It's never a legitimately purchased or acquired firearm. It's always a stolen firearm. Yes, sir.
Mark, one more. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I'm thinking not the areas that you're thinking of, but I'm thinking of Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, the major cities, which is where apparently Trinidad is, and MS-13 is more in the larger cities. I'm just wondering if places like that's where I would anticipate that the problem would really be, more so than a little small dime cut and shoot or dime box or little places like that. I wouldn't expect. I would expect more of the cities, because that's where the gangs are.
Right. And I'm sure I haven't heard a lot about that in our field. But like, for instance, Harris County, I mean, they have a huge detention facility, but they don't contract with other counties, because so I don't really, because they keep their facilities full of Harris County youth, and I can't imagine that it wouldn't affect those larger cities. Anytime you have gang violence, and if it's kids, like you said, being recruited who are under the age of 17, and they get arrested, for a felony offense, it comes to the juvenile justice system. It becomes our issue, and so I can't imagine it not affecting them.
Tom, did you have a question?
I did. It's you have facilities that you're sending these kids off to, and I'm wondering, is anybody measuring how successful they are? It seems to me if you're going to make a difference, you have to, in these facilities, give these kids life skills and maybe even a vocational skill. And I look for that being done, because these facilities are asking for HUD grants. And I serve on an advisory committee for those HUD grants for the residential facility. And I'm always looking for, how do you solve the problem? Anybody can identify it, but how do you get a solution? And to me, the solution is these kids have to have life skills and feel good about themselves in a vocational way. That's just my.
And I agree with you. And I think you're on, there's a trend that's starting. I mean, there are some facilities that have provided, that we've been able to send kids to, court order kids into, that have some trades. And I think what I'm starting to see in the larger counties, Fort Bend County has taken the lead on this, and I don't have all the information in front of me. I don't want to misquote anything, but they are about to add a huge addition to their programming that is going to be a vocational school, because the recognition is, I mean, the reality of it is many of these kids, and I see it even in our community, we have kids who are struggling in a traditional school environment, but I have had kids that I've worked with that can tear an engine down and build it back up, and so what I was happy to see when I got the news of what Fort Bend County's doing, and it's catching the eye of the whole state, is this shift in thinking of, okay, maybe they don't necessarily have to have a high school diploma if we can teach them a marketable skill, or they can do both. And so I think there's some exciting things coming. I think they're going to take the lead on that. And I think what you're going to see in especially some of the larger counties, you're going to see it's going to become a model. And I think you're right on, Thomas, is we have to give them something that they can take back into the community and be successful. And yes, counseling is important. Yes, programming is important. But if you can teach them a trade, or even help them sharpen a skill that they have a passion at, like I use the example of, we've got kids that could take a lawnmower that hadn't ran in 5 years and get it running in 10 minutes, and because they learn and they do with their hands. And so I think we've got a long way to go. There are a few programs out there with vocations, but what I'm seeing is a trend starting, and to me, it's exciting.
Hey,
Just
Tom.
one comment. Yes, I'm an old country boy, grew up on a farm. I have a PhD, but let me tell you something. It's the life skills I learned on that farm and how to fix equipment with baling wire that got me through life. We've got to get back to realize a PhD and a college education doesn't make you successful in life.
Hey, Tom, I want to build on top of what Craig said. And then Heidi, I'm gonna come to you. Through my association with Craig, I've had the opportunity to work with some juvenile probation departments as a consultant, and I had the opportunity to go to Midland County several years back, and they had a director out there. He's now retired, but he got a grant and was able to do a reading assessment of every child that came through his detention center in Midland County. And then he shared that information with the school district. He didn't have to, he wasn't required, but he wrote a grant, got some money, assessed, because the school district wasn't able to do a reading assessment. And what he found was he had children that were in the 7th and 8th and 9th grade, and they were reading on the 4th grade level. So he was able to share that information. They had factual data that actually helped the school district. The second thing he did, I thought, kind of along your line, Midland, because of the oil and gas, they have a wonderful county library system. He worked with their county, since he was in the county government, with their county librarian, and they set up a library in the juvenile justice center. And every child that came through the juvenile justice system, if they didn't already have a public library card, he got them one. And he said, Kent, you wouldn't, I'm tearing up thinking about it. Some of these kids, they got a photo, they got an ID that said they were somebody, and they were able to go in, and they took them into the other libraries, and they said, this card will get you into any library in the county, and you can check out any book. And these kids, it was life-changing. So it's not just the job skills, it's about some of those skill sets. It's about just giving these children some self-worth, like Craig said. So I thought that was very interesting. And then the second one, and I'm coming to you, Heidi. The second one was, I worked in El Paso County with their juvenile justice, and they didn't have the vocational, but they actually had for those kids that had been adjudicated, but we're still waiting to be transferred. They had a boot camp, and they had the old fashioned boot camp. And that was making a difference too, to instill some discipline in the child. So those were two programs that I've witnessed firsthand, that I think.
Yeah, both great programs. Yeah, both great programs.
Heidi, I'm sorry. It's Craig's program. I just wanted to build on top of that. You had a question. You had a question.
Well, I'm just going to be negative Nancy, kind of, not really, but a little bit. So when I first started practicing, I worked with TYC kiddos trying to get them out. And it was a very eye-opening experience. Most of these kiddos had come from domestic violence homes. You know, they were used to violence. It was just a part of life. Of course, that's DFW. I don't know if it's different in other places, but what's the recidivism rate? I mean, I have a client now, a grandma raising her grandbaby because the legal father shot the baby mama when he realized he wasn't the father. What can we do to help kiddos not get into that situation?
You know, boy, if I had the answer to that question, I could probably write a book.
Right.
But I think that, so some of the things that I have that we're trying to build on and work on, because some of the trends that I'm seeing in our community, and it's unfortunate, but what we're seeing is a lack of parental involvement. I call it actively disengaged parents. I mean, they're there, and there's a home, and there's a parent or guardian, but there's no parenting going on at all. And so some of these kids, unfortunately, are basically running the streets. And like all of us, they're seeking a sense of belonging somewhere. And if they're not getting that at home, they're finding it in other places. And that's where we start seeing the rise in gang activity. The other problem with disengaged parents, and I'm not saying a lot of the parents we work with are great. I mean, they really are great to work with. And those are typically, we're more likely to have success when the parent works with us. When the parent works against us or says, not my problem, I ain't the one on probation, I don't have time to bring him to see your counselor, I don't have time to do this, I don't have time to do that. Those are the kids who most likely have a better chance of being unsuccessful. The ones where the parents get engaged and work with us and recognize we're not the boogeyman, we're not the bad guy, we're actually here to try to help your child, but you've got to help us help them. But unfortunately, what I've seen in the 10 years that I've been back is less engagement. And I had a meeting with our juvenile court judge today. And one of the things that we're wanting to build here in our community is some way to get other people involved, mentorship program. And I think that's, you know, a lot of larger departments have well-established mentorship programs. And I think that's one place where people in the community can step up and help, because the unfortunate reality is some of these kids, they don't have a parent or guardian who's going to give them what they need to be successful, and they need someone else to step in. We do the best that we can, but unfortunately, you know, we're officers of the court. We have to enforce court orders, and sometimes we have to play we're advocates for the kids, but then sometimes we're an adversarial role too, because we're the guy that has to go to the judge and say, Johnny's violating his probation, you know. And so one of the things my judge and I talked about today at length is trying to establish a mentorship program in our community for some of these kids who they've lost their way, but they're going to find a place where they feel like they belong and where they feel, for lack of better terms, loved. And unfortunately, sometimes that's in gangs. They find that sense of belonging there, and it leads to bad things. And so we're trying to figure out a way, you know, how do we, you know, sometimes just getting a parent to show up for court, you know, for it, they're like, it's not my problem. And I remind them, well, it's your child. I mean, you're responsible for him. But I think that's one of the big problems that we have. And I'll tag on to that. Another issue that we've seen really escalate, especially since COVID. Now you may have had representatives from school districts speak at some of your meetings, but we have a lot of kids that just aren't going to school. And that ties into my last point. When you have a disengaged parent who doesn't require you to go to school, I mean, I never thought about it. I never thought about it. I mean, the thought of skipping school when I was 16 years old, I'm like, man, I'm going to get it from Mr. Gentry. I'm going to get it from my coach. I'm going to get it from my dad when I get home, and probably my pawpaw, So the thought of skipping school never crossed my mind. We have kids, they've been 6 days all year. They come to us and we start checking school records, and they've had 6 days of attendance since September, and but part of that is a disengaged parent or guardian. They're not requiring it. Kid says, I ain't going to school, and they say, okay, and that's a real problem that we're trying to address. But I think that the answer to your question lies in something that I've been doing a lot of research, and kind of one of my big fat hairy goals before I retire is to have a well-established prevention and intervention program in my county. Because I think, unfortunately, the way the system is kind of set up right now, by the time the kids get to us, there's a lot of damage already done. So what I'm trying to figure out, not that we would ever give up on those kids, we'll always try to get them the help that they need. And there are success stories. There's a lot that goes along with that. But what I would like to do is start working with the school districts and start identifying kids before they've committed a crime, before they've gotten into any trouble or anything like that. Hey, this is a kid who we see, because the schools see him every day. We see him going down the wrong path. And how can we intervene with that child so I don't end up with an aggravated robbery felony or a murder or something like that, And so I think the key is going to be, as a community, I've got to start finding ways to reach these kids on the front end instead of struggling on the back end once they've gotten themselves into a significant amount of trouble. Now, can I sit here and say I have that all worked out and I have a plan and I can't say that, but I believe that's the future. If we're going to make a difference, if we're going to change behavior, we've got to start reaching these kids sooner.
Hey,
Because
Craig,
unfortunately, yes, sir.
as we start wrapping this up, I want to ask 2 questions from you. You've talked about salaries and so forth, and I know you only know your budget in Orange County, but what is the average salary of a juvenile probation officer? I realize it varies across the state, but are we talking in the 30s? We're talking about the 40s? We're talking in the 50s? What are we talking about?
Well, in Orange County, and I think I'm pretty I've checked with other counties, and our starting salary is about for a bachelor. If they have a bachelor's degree, we pay a little bit more if they have a master's degree. But if they have a bachelor's degree, our starting salary now we've got it up to, it's 51,000. Plus we have a state that 2 years ago, a kind of recognition of what you're talking about. The legislature did a directed grant and gave us a supplement. So you got 5% or 3,000, whichever was higher 1 year, and then they bumped. So they took whatever the county was paying you, they bumped it up by 5% or 3,000, whichever was higher in FY24, and then you got another 3,000 or 5%, whichever was higher in FY25 on top of our salary scale. So I mean, it's come a long way. I mean, I think when I started, it was in the 20s.
Well, the reason I bring that up is here in Orange County. So here you're talking about someone with a bachelor's degree getting, let's just say 40s or maybe 50,000. But at the same time, we have all this industry right here in Orange County, and someone at 18 can go get a job working construction, different type of work, but make 100 grand with overtime. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, so now my point is we talk. So I started extrapolating that around the state. And you start getting people that go, why is it hard to fill these positions, especially if I have a counselor or so forth? It's just hard.
Right, it is, and especially when you have a lot of industry, or even, I've talked to chiefs that have facilities that are like, they can go to Bucky's and make more than I can pay them to be a correctional officer in my facility, and they're not being assaulted or having bodily fluids flung at them, or you know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, how do you compete with that? You've got to get. That's why the supplement. That was part of the reasoning behind the supplement was, if we're going to fill these positions, you've got to pay the money, because if you can go to Bucky's and make more than you can as a juvenile correctional facility, you're able to get some people, but they got to really love what they're doing. And you're right, we have a similar situation here. I mean, you can. The industry around here, if you can get on even with one of the construction companies, you're going to make a lot more, because you're going to get overtime and all that kind of stuff. You're going to make a lot more money. The bottom line is, the people I hire have a passion for what they do, and they don't do it for the money, because they could find another job making more money. They do it because they love the work, and they have a passion for helping kids, and that's the needle in the haystack. And I'm getting ready to. I just posted a position today. I'm getting ready to start that hiring process, and you got to find that needle in the haystack. You got to find that person who they're not in it necessarily for the money, but they're in it because they have a passion, they have a heart, and they want to help kids. And because if you don't, you're not going to make it. You're not going to last. You're going to burn out.
Well, Craig, I'll hold my last question because we're out of time. Do you have any final closing comments to put a big bow on this? And then I'll open it up for one more question, and then we've got to close it out. We're at 7:00. Patrick, I'll call on you since you're right here. You've been raising your hand all night. You want to put a bow on this, Craig, or do you want to?
Yeah, I think I'll put a bow on it. I hope that I gave some insight and understand that the juvenile probation department in your community, they truly are people who have a passion for kids, and they want to help kids. And if you have a heart and want to help, find out if there's a way you can volunteer, find out if they have an established mentorship program, because I have time for one quick story, brag on one of my police chiefs.
Yes.
So, one of our police chiefs, one of the cities in Orange County is Vider. Chief Rod Carroll. Kent knows Rod. And Rod, on occasion, will do mentoring. If we get the right kid, he'll do mentoring with some of our kids. And it's unbelievable the difference it makes when the chief of police in their town lets them ride in the patrol car while he's on duty, see what it's like to be a police officer, see what it's like to deal with delinquents and criminals and things like that. But then also sometimes just, hey, let's go to Dairy Queen, sit down and have a meal and talk. Yeah. And the kids that he worked with during that mentorship program, you saw a change. You saw them have some self-confidence, and you saw a difference in them because they knew they had somebody in a position of authority who believed in them. And that's the most important thing. And I guess that would be the bow is these kids need someone who believes in them.
Well, Craig, it sounds like we're gonna have to bring you back because we're completely out of time. Patrick's gonna be out of his question. I know Mark had another question, but guys, we'll have Craig back at another time and maybe bring in Rod Carroll, will be another person to bring in. And but Craig, I want to thank you on behalf of the Lone Star Rotary Club for being our speaker. I hate to cut it off, but I mean we're 7:00 and I know members, but man, what a great program. Craig and I have coffee. I go down to his office on my Fridays off a lot of time after I leave the hardware store, and we talk about SFA and we talk about games. and so forth. But this is why I have a passion for what he has. I have several stories to tell about Craig and how he got a grant about a fishing boat, and that's a whole. Do you want to hear the facts or a good story? I'll tell you that time. Tell y'all about how Craig conned the state Texas. No, thank you, Craig. Thank y'all very much. I will put in the email. I'll send everybody an email with Craig's email address as well, so y'all can send him a thank you note and ask him any questions. And I think we need to all be supportive of our local juvenile probation departments in our respective counties. They have them on Facebook, events, cops and kids and so forth. Donate money for that. If you own a business, donate some money, donate your time. That's a good service opportunity because I know here in Orange County, they have a big cops and kids that's not open to the public. It's for certain kids that get invited out. But the idea is they're trying to hit these at-risk kids. And so
actually, the cops and kids here in Orange County is open to the public.
Oh, is it? Okay, good. I did not know.
Yeah, anybody, any kid, you can bring any kids. Anybody can come out there, so it's open to the public. It's a great program. Yeah, and
well, we'll have you and Rod back and do a program on that as well. Any final comments? Anything that that can't wait? Patrick, can it wait, or do you just have the comment? You got to.
It's a comment.
Okay, go ahead and make the comment. You unmute yourself, and I'll mute mine.
Fantastic program, Craig. This club consistently has the best programs that I've heard in my 33 years of Rotary. Without a doubt, I mean, you all need to share and invite more people to this club and get more members because they're missing out on fantastic programs. Again, thank you, Craig, for everything you do and a great program.
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity. So,
yep. And I'll pay him with some whiskey for the. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give Craig a round of applause, guys.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank y'all for having me. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Karen and Bobby and Kent, you guys. Yeah.
We're gonna close out with the 4-way test, which is Berta loves because she wants us to be a singing club. Craig needs to experience this. We're gonna do the 4-way test of the things we do. So unmute yourself, everybody. Not you, Patrick.
Wait, I'll sing it.
And let's do the
4-way test of the things we think, say, and do.
Or do first.
All right. First,
is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Second,
Is
it
it
fair
concern?
Third,
will it build
a better friendship?
And fourth,
will it be beneficial
to all concerned?
we had the Rotary Conference this weekend. The 5th.
Is it
fun?
That's right. That's right.
Yay.
Craig, I'll send that to you. I know it was brutal listening to this. Berta wants it to be a singing club, and oh God, I get a headache.
I sang.
I know. And,
Killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Right. But thank y'all so much.
We did. Okay, we're gonna do, Karen, next meeting, we're gonna do a song.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
All right. Now, our next meeting is in 2 weeks. We don't have a program. It's going to be a club assembly. Jason, we're giving the meeting to Jason to talk about his year, and he's going to talk about needs and wants, and we're going to do a little strategic planning. So on the April 17th, whatever it is, the third Thursday is our next meeting. We do need all of our members there, and it's going to be kind of a club assembly. So we can talk about Jason's year and talk about what his expectations are. And so Rotarians, y'all are welcome to visit. We'd love y'all's input. We're members. We only have 14 members. If you know anybody that's interested in an e-club experience, I'd love for y'all to join us. I'm gonna have coffee with Craig again, so I can get Craig to join us at some point. But his schedule this might work out for him. But anyway, guys, thank y'all so very much. We'll stay on the line. The meeting is officially over. I'm ringing the bell. We can stay on if you want to stay on.
Are we having a board meeting next week?
We'll have the board meeting at our club assembly. We'll have at the club assembly.
Okay.
We'll have a board meeting next week. We'll have the board meeting before we start the club assembly at the next meeting at 6 p.m.